Good afternoon and welcome to Carlum Cymru revision sessions. This session will focus on biology GCSE and will be presented by Mrs. Kavanagh from Connors Quay High School. The session will last around 45 minutes, where the teacher will go through the relevant subject content. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer section and we will endeavour to answer your question during the session. The session will be recorded, with the recording and any relevant resources uploaded to the e-sgol website in the Carlum Cymru area.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. This session today is a follow-on really from what Mrs. Cedar did last week. So we're focusing on the nervous system in terms of response and regulation, but also moving on a little bit to look at some different areas in terms of phototropism for those of us doing triple, but also looking at reflex action and the reflex arc as well. So what are we going to focus on in this session today? Well, we're going to have a look at the senses and the sense organs. We're going to look at what the nervous system is, and look at reflex actions, and also talk about the reflex arc for those of us who are doing higher tier. We're also going to have a look at lifestyle choices and how they affect our body. And then for those of us on triple, we're just going to have a look at phototropism at the end. Okay, so let's have a look first at senses and sense organs. So you might remember that we have a number of different sense organs in our body. So let's have a look at some of those now to remind ourselves. So we've got the skin, the tongue, the nose, the eye, and the ear. And what we need to have a think about are what sense organs are, what they do, and why they are important in our body. So sense organs are groups of receptor cells, and they respond to specific stimuli. So they respond to things in our environment that help us either stay safe or send a message to us so that we can think about what we are doing and perhaps change what we are doing. So let's have a look at some of these in a little bit more detail. So here's one of our sense organs, and this is the ear. Now the ear's job is to detect changes in the world around us, and it'll detect change in our environment. And the ear, its job is to detect sound. Our skin is a very important way of detecting changes. So it detects change in temperature, it can detect change in pressure, and detect change in pain. And you can see from this image here that our skin can detect differences in different textures and can pass that information on to our brain so that we know where we are and what we are doing. Here in this video, we can see that the child is detecting different tastes and how those tastes may be for that person. So we can detect taste, and it's our tongue that detects those chemical changes or those chemical differences in food and drink, what we eat. Here we can see that our nose is being used to detect any chemical changes in the air. And our sense organs, when they detect these changes, they are detecting stimuli, and we have special cells called receptor cells that produce these impulses that respond to these particular stimuli. And finally, we have our eyes. So as you can see here, our eyes are detecting changes in light in the cinema here, and that information is relayed to our brain so that we understand what we are viewing. Now, these sense organs work in tandem with other parts of our nervous system. So here we can see an image of parts of our nervous system that make up something called the central nervous system. And those parts that make up our central nervous system are the brain and the spinal cord. And the brain and the spinal cord work together in that central nervous system alongside our nerves in our peripheral nervous system. That's the part that surrounds the outside of the brain and the spinal cord. And that is critical for our survival and our behaviour in the environment. This image shows us some different types of nerve cells. Nerve cells are crucial in passing information around our body, and they pass that information in terms of electrical impulses from one nerve to the next. Now we're just going to pause briefly and have a look at an exam question. So I found this exam question that was quite a useful question actually to start with, looking at stimuli and sense organs. So if you are watching this as a recording, then you can pause your film now and have a go at the question. If not, we'll have a little look at it together now and then go through the answers. So here we've got John at a pedestrian crossing, and when it's safe to do so, the crossing makes a high-pitched sound and the light flashes green. So we've got a table here for 2 marks that we need to fill in to name the 2 stimuli that John detects and any sense organs that are involved. And then following on from that, then 2 answers here about the information that's sent along neurons. In what form is that information transported, and what part of the nervous system processes information from the neurons. So let's have a look at what we might think we would put in here. Okay, so the stimulus, first of all, would be the sound, where it says there in part A, the crossing makes a high-pitched sound. So we know the stimulus is a sound, and the sense organ that detects that would be the ears. And then the second stimulus would be the light, because we can see there in the question it tells us that the light flashes green, and our sense organ there is the eyes. And you can see there on the mark scheme that we can't accept certain answers there, so refer back to that in the upload later on so that you can check your answers. In what form does information travel along the neurons? These are our nerve cells, and that information travels in the form of an impulse or an electrical signal. And then finally, the parts of the nervous system that process the information from the neurons, that's our central nervous system that does that. And remember, our central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so moving on, and I want you to just have a look at the image here. So this shows us how information moves from receptors, which are those parts of our body that detects the change, to the effectors, which could be a muscle that brings about that change. Okay, and we can see here that the receptor, so that is the part now that detects that change. So it could be the eye that detects a change in light, or it could be the skin that detects a change in a surface. And the neuron involved there is called a sensory neuron, and that is something that senses that change. And that information is sent to our brain or to our spinal cord to coordinate what we do in terms of, well, how do we deal with that change that the receptor and the sensory neuron have detected. And it could be that the motor neuron or a movement nerve enables us to move. So for example, if we think of a hot surface and we put our hand on that hot surface, it is detected by the temperature sensors in our skin. So that is our receptor, and it's the sensory neuron that sends that information to our brain, to our spinal cord, to say we need to move our hand very quickly. And it's the motor neuron that brings about that with the effector. So the muscles in our hands move that away there. And it's a very, very fast process for that to take place. And that information, those of us who are on higher tier, we need to be aware that the receptor cell passes that electrical impulse along the sensory neuron, and it reaches the coordinator, which is the central nervous system. And then sometimes we have a relay neuron, which I'll show you shortly, and then to a synapse again to the motor neuron, and then the central nervous system again, and then we can move whatever we need to, or our body changes, that effector takes place. So let's have a look at this reflex that takes place in a little bit more detail. So the stimulus, the receptor, the sensory neuron, the relay neuron, the motor neuron, the effector, and then our response. So we have neurons all around our body, but they're inside the spine and the brain, or the brain, and reflex actions are fast and automatic, so that if something does take place, we do that very quickly without even thinking about it. So our reflex arc here, we need to be able to show the receptor, so we would think about the skin cells that detect that change. We would think about the effector, which will be the muscle that moves that away, moves the arm away from the hot surface, for example. So what are the benefits of having a reflex action? Well, they're fast, so they get us out of danger very quickly. They're automatic, so we don't have to think about what we are doing. We don't have to think, oh, I must move my arm from this very hot area. It does it automatically. And then finally, it's protective. So it's a protective mechanism for us to avoid being injured or hurt. So let's have a look now at some examples of different reflexes. So here's our first reflex. Okay, so in this first picture that we've seen, we can see that there's a reflex taking place in this person. They're being gently tapped with a hammer on their wrist, and that's causing their arm to move. So this is a reflex action. It's not something that we think about doing, or that we can stop or change. And it's our nervous system that joins together to form this, that allows us to detect any changes and to react to any changes in our environment, to bring about a response, so to avoid us being in trouble or to be in any danger. So secondly, looking at this image, I want you to think about what is happening and why it is happening here. Okay, so in this image we have an eye, and you can clearly see, I'll just play it again while I'm talking, you can clearly see that there is a change being brought about there. And that change is being brought about, it's a reflex action, it's not something that we can think about or that we can do ourselves, but it's a reflex, it's an automatic, fast response that is protective. So it's saving our eyes. And what is happening is, as the light is entering our eye, it's controlled by this reflex action. So the size of that pupil will change size in response to the amount of light that is coming in. And this is brought about by the muscles in the iris. So they are the effector in this situation. So as the light is coming into the eye, the information is being sent through our nervous system to tell us that it's too bright here, we need to do something, and that brings about then with the sensory neuron, the relay neuron, the motor neuron. The motor neuron then sends that message to the muscle in the eye to make sure that that then closes the muscles and makes that aperture smaller, so that we don't have as much light going in. And of course, by doing that, that protects our eye. And this again, just a reminder, this is a very fast reaction that is protective and also is very good in terms of protecting us from anything that might harm our eyesight. So looking at this next image now, what do we think about this? Why is this a beneficial reflex action. So let's see it again. Oops. Okay, so here we can see blinking taking place in this eye, here in this lady. And why might we need to blink? Again, it's not something that we can control when in this situation. So when something is causing perhaps some dirt or some dust that has got into our eye, we might blink quite rapidly to try and get that out of our eyes. Let's look at our next image. So that was quite a sneeze there. What do you think caused that? What was the situation that brought about that situation there where that gentleman was sneezing quite a lot and quite heavily? So he detected a change. So perhaps some dust had caused his nose to react to that, and it brought about the response of a sneeze to get rid of whatever it was that had caused that tickle or that irritation in his body. Okay, let's look at a question now to do with that. Here we are. So here's a question to do with nervous impulses and neurons and stimuluses. So let's have a read through it. So again, if you are accessing this later on, then you can have a look at this and pause it and then have a go at the question, and then we'll have a look at it. You can have a look at it, the answers in your own time. But for the rest of us, let's have a look. So Gareth takes a penalty kick. He watches the moving ball speed towards the goal. So when it says there, he watches, what kind of sense organs are being involved there? And what is the stimulus? So the stimulus is light and the sense organ is the eye. Let's have a look at the list. So the list below describes how the nervous system takes part in some of the above events, but not in the correct order. So this might be an exam question that you might come across where you've got to put statements in the correct order based on what information you've got there. Okay, so the impulses pass along neurons, the receptor cells respond to this stimulus, light from the moving ball strikes receptor cells in his eye, the central nervous system processes the information and electrical impulses are produced. So what you've got to do here is place the 5 statements in the correct order. And as you can see though there that it's worth 3 marks. So you don't get 1 mark for each correct statement, which is something that you might need to be aware of when you're answering this. So if you should get 2 or 3 correct, then you get 1 or 2 marks in this question. So that's something perhaps to think about when you tackle these questions. And then looking at question B, the eye is a sense organ. State the name of one other sense organ and the stimulus it detects. So in this question, it's asking you to think of another organ that is a sense organ and then list the stimulus that it may be detecting. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a think about those and then we'll have a look at the answers. Okay, let's have a look. So, firstly, we should have said that light from the ball strikes receptor cells in the eye. So that's what Gareth would say first. It's the light from the ball that would be noticed by his receptor cells. And secondly, the receptor cells would respond to that stimulus. So that's number 2. So far we've got 3 and 2. Then electrical impulses are produced, which is number 5. Then the impulses pass along neurons, which is number 1. And then the central nervous system processes the information. Okay, so it's 3, 2, 5, 1, 4 there. Okay, and obviously depending on how many you get correct there, you can see if you got all 5 right, then you would get all 3 marks. For the second part there for B, so we're looking at one other sense organ and then the stimulus that detects, and obviously that stimulus has got to match the organ. So we could have the ear as an organ and the stimulus that detects is sound or a vibration. And then we could have the tongue or the nose and that detects chemicals. And then finally, the skin as a sense organ and the stimulus that detects would be touch or pain or temperature or pressure. Okay, so hopefully we've got full marks on that question. Now, I want you to have a look at this image here, this film. And this is something now about plants and phototropism that is for higher tier candidates and for higher tier on triple as well. So phototropism, as you can see here, I want you to just have a think and have a look about what is happening in this film. And we saw there that the plant was moving in the direction of light. And that's what phototropism means there. You can see photo means light and tropism means movement. So it's the movement of that plant towards light. Now, it's not the kind of movement where an animal might move around and look for food. This is the movement where the leaves move in the optimum direction so that they can get the maximum amount of light. And this is the growth or the movement of this plant in response to a cell, the response of a cell, sorry, I should say, to light. And why do plants need light? Well, they need light for them to carry out the process of photosynthesis. So they need light and they need water for this to take place. And plants have developed these processes or these ways of maximising what they need, and they are called tropisms. And that helps them grow, in this case, towards the light. And when a plant is growing towards the light, this is called positive phototropism. So we'll say that again. So phototropism is the idea that a plant will grow towards light so that it can get the maximum amount of light that it needs. And if it's moving towards light, if it's bending and growing towards light, then that's called positive phototropism. And if a plant is not growing towards light and is growing away from light, then that's called negative phototropism. And it's not just the leaves that can do this on a plant. Other parts can grow depending on what they are looking for. So, for example, the stem could grow up and grow towards light, so that would be positive phototropism. But what about the roots? Do roots grow towards light? Well, we know that roots grow downwards, don't we? So they're not growing towards the light, so that would be negative phototropism shown by the roots. But what do roots do? We know that they grow down towards light, towards the soil to get minerals or to get water that they need. So they are growing due to the force of gravity downwards, and that's called positive geotropism. And all of this information, really, all of this idea of how plants grow, this is all brought about by hormones, and hormones are very important in plant regulation and how plants work. And like us as humans and as mammals and animals, hormones are important for us to help us to develop or to survive. In a similar way, plants have hormones to enable them to survive. And these movements, the phototropisms or the geotropisms of plants that enable them to get the food or the water they need or the light they need, is brought about and helped by a particular set of hormones, and they are called auxins. So auxin is a particular group of hormones or a family of plant hormones, and they are mostly found in the tip of roots and stems. Why is that? Because that's where the majority of the plant's growth takes place. So that's why we need quite a high amount of auxin at the tip of the root and the tip of the stem of the plant, because that's where the majority of growth is taking place. And auxin, the hormone, controls the rate of elongation. So it controls how long and how fast that growth is taking place in the plant. And auxin is mostly made there in the tips and the roots of the stems, and it diffuses to other parts if it needs to be. And if there is more auxin, then cells in the stem will grow more. But conversely, if there is more auxin or a high concentration of auxin, then cells in the roots will grow a little bit less. So let's have a look at this in a diagram here. So here we can see we've got a plant here with the light shining up on it from above. And we can see the concentration of auxin. So there at the very top of the plant stem, at the tip of the shoot, we've got auxin there in what's called the meristem, the very top of the tip there. And you can see it's highly concentrated because it's very red there in colour at the top. As you move slightly down that shoot, you can see that that concentration is changing. So from it being quite a reddish colour at the top, it's becoming orange and slightly yellower further down. So when the light is shining from above, it's got a quite even distribution of light over that tip of the plant, and the auxin is evenly moving down that, so that all of the shoots are elongating, or all of the shoots are growing in the same way at the same time. So let's recap that again. So here we've got a diagram showing auxin at the tip of this growing shoot, and it's highly concentrated at the tip of that shoot, and the light is at an equal amount at the top there on the top of the shoot, so auxin is very well concentrated at the top. What that enables then is that auxin to be concentrated along the edge of that meristem, along the edge of the tip of that shoot, and all of those shoots then elongate or grow at the same rate. So that's great then for gardeners or for anyone who wants their plants to grow, that high light and high auxin at the top means that that shoot grows at an appropriate way. But what happens when light is coming from one direction? So if light is coming so that we've got positive phototropism, what would happen to our auxin levels then? So let's have a look at this in another diagram now. So here we've got light coming from one side, so it's unidirectional light shining on our meristem again, on our shoot tip, and we can see the concentration of auxin at the top of the plant. And you can see here it's very different to where it was in the previous picture, where we had auxin concentrated at the top and then moving equally down in terms of concentration down the shoot. But you can see here that we've got the auxin at the top, but then if you look at the shady side of the plant, we've got high levels of auxin gathered there as well. And auxin is elongating those stems on the shady side of the plant. And as that is elongating, they're growing longer on that side. So the stem is bending, and it's bending towards the light. So we've got two things really going on here. We've got that the plant is growing towards the light, which is a positive phototropism, so the light is encouraging that plant to grow in that direction towards it, but it's the auxin, that plant hormone, that brings about that change. And as the auxin gathers there on that shaded side there, where it's highly concentrated, that is causing the cells to elongate in a way that is not evenly distributed across that shoot. Okay, so let's have a look at a question to do with plants and phototropism. Okay, so first of all on this question, we have to think about what is meant by the term tropism. And then we've got a little experiment that we need to analyse. So first of all, what is meant by the term tropism? So again, if you're watching this as a recording, you can pause this, have a go at these two questions, and then restart the film and have a look at the answers when we go through them shortly. For those of us who are here, so we've got to look at the term tropism, and then we've got a little bit of reading to do and a diagram to interpret. So some students in a school lab pinned a young bean seedling to a vertical upright cork disc, which they left in the dark for 48 hours. After 48 hours, the seedling was examined and the young root was found to have grown downwards. This is shown in the diagram below. So we've got here in the diagram a cork disc at the start, and there's our seed, our bean seed that's been pinned in, and the young root just starting, and then after 48 hours, what is happening there to that root of the bean seedling? Okay, and then your question relating to that is to state why the young root has grown downwards. So why has that root gone downwards? Okay, so a couple of minutes to have a think about that, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, let's have a look, everybody. Okay, so what is meant by the term tropism? So here is our stock answer, really. This is something that we should make sure that we learn and keep with us, really, for any exams that we are attempting. So it's a growth response shown by a plant or by a plant root or shoot to a one-sided stimulus. So it's the response shown by a plant to a one-sided stimulus. So it's not asking you what is phototropism or geotropism, it's just asking you what is meant by the term tropism. And then for the second part, for B, it says, why is the young root grown downwards? And we can see that the root has grown downwards there to the source of gravity. So it's shown positive geotropism. So remember, we introduced those terms positive and negative in front of what were either phototropism or geotropism. So here in this case, the root has grown down towards the source of gravity because of positive geotropism. Okay, let's have a look at another example. So here we've got a plant in a diagram which shows positive phototropism. So that tells us straight away that that plant is growing towards the light. It's a positive phototropism. So let's look at the questions. In a phototropic response, state what is the stimulus and the response. And then we've got to circle the correct answer below to complete the following sentence. The response is due to, and then we circle one of those answers, and then state the advantage of phototropism to the plant. So these are all worth 1 mark, these answers here on this particular question. So a couple of minutes to have a think, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, let's have a look, everybody. So the plant in the diagram shows positive phototropism. So in a phototropic response, what is the stimulus? Well, in this case, it's light. Phototropism, so it's light. That's the stimulus. And then the response is that it grows towards the light. So the plant grows towards light, or it shows positive phototropism. Now, there on the mark scheme, you can see that it says, but it does not. So you can't have that it bends towards the light or it moves towards the light. So make sure that you are very specific in the language that you use when you are answering any questions like this, that it grows towards the light or that it shows positive phototropism. Circle the correct answer. So the response is due to a hormone. And that hormone we know, because we've just discussed it, is auxin. And then finally, state the advantage of phototropism to the plant. And it's an advantage because the plant is able to get more light or it's able to carry out more photosynthesis. Okay, so more light equals more photosynthesis. So moving on then to look at our last section really, which is looking at risks and looking at the risk of the way we behave and how that might affect our body. And some conditions that we may have are affected by the lifestyle that we lead and by those choices that we make. So I want you to have a look at a short clip in a second, and I just want you to have a think about what the risks are there in this picture, in the images that you see, and what sort of illnesses or diseases may develop in us if we carry on taking part in these risky behaviours. Okay, so what are the people doing that are perhaps undesirable activities? Okay, so did you get them? So we have people who may be smoking, eating the wrong foods, eating junk foods, and drinking alcohol. And our lifestyle or eating too much food over a long period of time can lead to the development of certain diseases. So for example, diabetes or type 2 diabetes in particular, and can help really with the onset of other diseases as well, thinking about heart disease, for example. And it's these other diseases really that can come when we drink more alcohol. So alcohol can cause a problem for us if we drink too much. Even if we have a small amount of alcohol, it can affect our reaction rate. And of course, that could have a terrible effect if somebody is driving a car, for example. Alcohol is addictive, and then people can become more and more addictive, require more and more alcohol, and then of course it becomes very difficult to break that cycle, and that can have major damage to our body over a long period of time if we carry on drinking. It can also affect the liver, it can affect the circulatory system. Smoking, as we know, and also misusing drugs can affect many organs in our body over a long period of time that can cause problems with our heart and strokes, for example, as well, or other illnesses that may be caused by that. And what we have to think about in this section, looking at lifestyle, the questions may not necessarily ask us about lifestyle or illnesses that may be caused or diseases that may be caused, but we need to interpret a question, and generally these questions are graph questions or data questions. So let's have a look at this example here just to finish off with. So 2 ways in which excessive alcohol consumption can cause long-term physical damage to the body. So think about that first of all, 2 marks, so 1 mark for each physical damage that you record there. And then for question B, an investigation was carried out into the effect of alcohol and reaction time. 5 people were asked to drink some alcohol and the time taken to respond to a stimulus was recorded, and that was seen there in the graph. So then you're asked then to interpret, what does the graph show you? Which person, so we've got the people there along the bottom, which person had the longest reaction time, and how does drinking alcohol before driving a car increase the risk of having a road traffic accident? So just 1 minute there, have a think about those questions there and how you might approach them and answer them, and then we'll have a look at the answers. Okay, let's have a look then. So 2 ways in which alcohol can cause a long-term, so it's long-term damage to our body, not short-term but long-term. So we could have liver damage, which is quite a common one to remember, and again you can have cirrhosis of the liver, circulatory disease, heart disease, brain damage. There's a list of cancers there such as throat, tongue, liver cancer, and then kidney disease or kidney damage or kidney failure. So there's quite a range of illnesses that excessive alcohol can cause there in the body. What conclusion can be shown in the graph? That alcohol consumption increases reaction time or slows reaction time. Alcohol consumption slows reactions down. So alcohol there slows reaction speed. Which person has the longest reaction time? So there you can see it's person 2. They've got the longest gap between the bars on their graph there in terms of reaction times. And how does drinking alcohol before driving a car increase that risk of having an accident? And it's to do with their taking longer to react to avoid an accident. And of course, then, you know, that brings about the accident there. So that's what we need to think about then when we're looking at lifestyle, and think about how we can mitigate any of those situations. So we're just coming to the end now of our session. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. And just a reminder that we've looked at the senses and sense organs. We've looked over reflex actions and parts of the nervous system. We've looked at phototropism and how that works in plants, and how lifestyle choices affect our body. Just a reminder then that we're looking at another revision session next week, which I'm sure we'd be delighted for you to join. So thanks everybody for your time, and see you next time. Thank you.